I'm Mindy Todd. Welcome to The Point. Today we wrap up our series of general election debates with the candidates running for U.S. Congress in the 9th Congressional District. The district includes all of Barnstable, Dukes, and Nantucket counties, as well as some communities in Bristol and Plymouth counties. The candidates are Mark Allegro, a Republican candidate from Falmouth. Christopher Cataldo is an unenrolled candidate from Norwell. William Keating is a Democratic candidate from Bourne. Paul Harrington is an independent candidate from Chatham. And Anna Grace Raddick is an unenrolled candidate from Halifax. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, so a reminder of the format, up to a minute for answers to questions, 30 seconds for rebuttals, and we'll have 2-minute closing statements at the end of the hour. And we're going to go in alphabetical order. Mark Allegro, we're going to start with you. For listeners who are not familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background and why you think you're the best candidate for the job.
Sure. I've had some varied experience in my background. Let's go way back. I put myself through college working in a fish market, often for 69 hours a week. I served as a first responder on a fire and rescue squad, worked in a startup biotech company, and served as a hospice volunteer after Hurricane Katrina. I raised 2 daughters with my wife of 34 years, Marianne, and spent over 30 years teaching and doing research in biomedical sciences. I finished up my career as a scientist right here at the MBL in Woods Hole with a joint appointment at Brown University, and I also served as a program director at the National Science Foundation. I'm running for Congress because I won't stand by while the president and his accomplices fundamentally transform this country into something unrecognizable as the United States. My parents grew up in the Depression, and they worked and fought through World War II to realize the American dream. They handed off a great country to my sisters and I intend to hand off that same great nation to my children and grandchildren.
Thank you. Chris Cataldo.
Thank you, Mindy, and thank you, NPR. My name is Chris Cataldo, and I'm a lifelong resident of our 9th District. And as a retail consumer small business banker, I understand how to save and grow our economy for our families to have good-paying jobs. We need to stop a third world war that a no-fly zone in Syria guarantees and end the funding of mercenary jihadist groups fighting a Syrian government that won't fall in line for an oil pipeline of Saudi Arabian or Russian origin. It's time to save retirement with uniform public accounting standards on public pensions to correct trillion-dollar shortfalls for those that have paid in and make Social Security solvent again. Big Pharma will pay for the heroin opioid epidemic with their billions and stop millions in doctor kickbacks. The Obamacare insurance monopoly, along with the $5 billion FDA approval process, must end for increases in prescriptions and copays to stop. The days of colleges and universities operating endowments as tax-exempt hedge funds must also end. I will mandate term limits and not take a penny more than the median income as a salary. Thank you.
Thank you. William Keating.
Well, thank you, Mindy. I grew up the son of a veterans agent and was taken around with him as he traveled from veteran to help them. I come from a Gold Star family. I also, when I was 19, was the chair of the Christian Service Commission at our church and worked in ecumenical causes, particularly to help seniors. I was a legislator in the Mass House and Senate, and I learned that government can make a difference. One of the first bills I put in provided smoke detectors that saved lives to this day. I also was a district attorney and had the chance of running that institution and also learning that a lot of the criminal justice issues are really public health issues, like the opioid issue. And I started a task force with that a decade and a half ago with the new drug czar from Massachusetts as a member of that. And I've been a member of Congress and have come to know the needs of this district and continue to serve those needs. So I've also been in small business running my own law office for a while, too. So varied background that I think I can bring to help the needs of Cape Cod and the whole district.
Thank you. Paul Harrington.
Thank you, Mindy. As you mentioned, my wife Christine and I live in Chatham, originally from Dorchester, and lived in Duxbury for 26 years, where we raised our 3 children. I'm a graduate of BC High, Boston College, and Suffolk Law School. The reason I'm running for Congress is because our government in Washington is dysfunctional. And I believe it's because of the two-party system that is not solving the problems that are going to get worse in the years ahead. We face many, many challenges. And I've been a problem solver all my life. I started my own law practice in private practice. That was the nature of the business. I grew it from a one-man operation to a 30-person firm. I left the law practice to help a company go public, the DeWolf Companies. I was there for 11 years in a series of management roles, correcting some issues at the problem and helping the company to grow. So I wrote a book on public policy, a serious book that I published 2 years ago, The Common Sense Rules, and I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion here today. Thank you.
Anna Grace Raddick.
Hi, my name is Anna Grace Raddick. I'm from Halifax, Mass. I'm running for the 9th Congressional District because I'm the victim of financial trafficking, life insurance through MetLife. I was told that I needed to marry a rich man and collect money on my ex-husband, and I said no, so I reported to local, state, and federal police. I was told there was nothing they could do for me and that it's a women's rights problem. And I also was a victim of significant harassment. I learned that Congress made tauntings, which were a life insurance product, illegal in 1897. Currently, we do have life insurance, which was developed in 1906. There's a lot of crimes surrounding this product. I came up with solutions that could be implemented in Wall Street, and also a new ID program available through U.S. Marshals that would be life-saving. I also came up with ideas to make our federal immigration office stronger, so I wanted to promote those ideas. I studied English literature, BA, also business management at UOP San Diego. I was a social worker in MHMR, and also I worked at a homeless shelter for women and children. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Cataldo, we start with you this time. What do you see as opportunity for economic growth in the district?
Well, I see such opportunity. I see a district filled with people that are so thirsty for opportunity, and our families need good paying jobs. You know, one of my biggest concerns right now in Congress is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, this idea that our economic policies aren't going to be able to be beneficial to our country. I mean, when we look at what happened with NAFTA, you know, we lost 5.7 million jobs and over 66,000 manufacturing plants. And, you know, I'll tell you, when you look at intellectual property, real competition, economic development, you know, there's good intervention and there's bad intervention when it comes to government policy. And when it comes to jobs in this district, you know, I look at the plumbers, the carpenters, the electricians, I look at the HVAC techs. You know, we need to make sure that there's an ability for people to open small business, to keep those doors open. You know, I think a huge problem with creating jobs is the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. I mean, it was basically orchestrated by corporate lobbyists of the insurance industry. You know, we need to make sure that people have the ability to get good paying jobs. Energy is a huge opportunity for us, you know, when it comes to wind, hydro, solar. You know, and I really think that this district of any place, you know, has that opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank
William
you.
Keating.
Well, the economy here is one that I think presents great opportunities. I know that what we have to do here, particularly to keep younger people here, is to provide the training and education that's necessary. And that starts at the earliest level. I've supported Head Start here. I've supported funding and programs for Cape Cod Community College, where there's jobs looking for people, and we're making that occur with the avionics grant that we got for that. I'm here to support the traditional economies that are still big. Cranberry growers, we're working with them on the drought issue right now. We're working on them providing new markets through the Export-Import Bank. The fishing industry, beleaguered by some onerous regulations and climate change, we've worked to get them disaster money and to get rid of some of those regulations. But there's expansion in the green economy. Offshore wind off of Martha's Vineyard is going to be extraordinary. We will be, I think, with research funding into Woods Hole and SMAST, we will be a district that is the Silicon Valley of the marine industry in the future, because we have the foundation in place to do that.
Thank you. Paul Harrington.
Yeah, thank you. This district, like every part of the country, is affected by the major impacts of economic policies of the government. The government really shouldn't be in the job of creating jobs, taking that role on. They should be in the role of supporting the economy. How do they do that? I take a different approach to economic matters. I've studied the economy very strenuously, seriously, and I believe that we need free markets, we need less regulation from the government, but we also need less inequality of income and wealth. So the Democrats will support one of those, the Republicans will support the other, and they'll both each oppose one of them. So it's a hybrid approach in my view. The demand side is driven by a more equal distribution of income and wealth, because spending drives the economy, and the supply side is driven by a free market and less regulation.
Thank you. Anna Grace Raddick.
Well, I agree that green and energy, wind and solar, are their future. Also, I wanted to say that I support Obama's idea to create 2 years of free community college, which would only it wouldn't really be very costly. However, there need to be jobs available for people. I support small businesses because that's a large part of the economy, and also would like to be a diplomatic force and bring businesses here. But what I hear, being from a working class area of Halifax, Pembroke, those areas, is that a lot of people miss like WearGuard and that kind of business where you could make a good living and support your family, $20 an hour. It just seems like there's a lot of pink collar work out there in stores and retail, and so I'd like to bring some of those businesses back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Allegro.
The opportunity for economic growth in the 9th District rests with our small and medium-sized businesses. Across the country, I think a lot of people understand that they create 2/3 of the jobs. You need jobs to have a strong economy because you need people to have money in their pocket to put back into the economy and for revenue stream. Now, here in the Cape and Islands, there's a lot of talk about a blue economy. That's just common sense. We can't go into all the details, but there are opportunities for marine technology and marine biotechnology type businesses. That's the reason that the necessity of supporting the small businesses is why we have proposed a 9th District Business Council, which would allow regular access to the congressman and a dedicated staff member with regular meetings so that we can provide the kind of friendly environment, do what the businesses need to not only to survive but to thrive, provide that kind of environment so that they can create the jobs that will help the local economy.
Thank you. William Keating, we start with you this time. Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station is set to close by 2019, and some have expressed concerns about safety. Do you share those concerns, and do you support closing the plant earlier?
Sure, the plant is going to close. It's going to close no later than 2019, and I've been working on many levels to try and deal with that decommissioning. I've worked across the aisles in Congress, getting Republicans and Democrats from coast to coast to put a coalition together of congressmen that are facing decommission problems in their districts, so our voices can be stronger. I've worked on legislation to make sure that the dry casking is there after 7 years for having safety in that regard. I've worked at the local level to make sure the town of Plymouth in particular, the process can be expedited, the environmental needs can be met, the economic issues can be dealt with, and I've worked with the workers who are going to have face great adjustment there. Those are good paying jobs for their families. I've worked on retraining opportunities for them and how they can plug into the new industry, the offshore wind industry, and get good jobs there as well. So at all levels, we've been working to do it. We have to keep Plymouth safe while it's closing down.
Thank you. Paul Harrington.
Thank you, Mindy. I lived about 5 miles from the Pilgrim Power Plant and could see it from my house. I understand the concerns, the safety concerns, and certainly the NRC needs to be held to account for the safe decommissioning. But also, we should have a permanent nuclear waste repository, which we don't have. It was set and ready to go at Yucca Mountain in Nevada. It was killed because of partisan politics. And these are the problems that we have in Washington. The solutions to some major problems like nuclear waste repository can easily be agreed to, but they're not because of the divisiveness in Washington. I think nuclear power can be part of the mix, but we need to have a balance between the 3 E's, the economy, the environment, and energy. And we need an all-of-the-above approach to energy. Thank you.
Anna Grace Raddick.
Well, a lot of people are concerned about the nuclear power plant in regard to the safety. Actually, nuclear power is quite safe and clean. It's just the maintenance of the waste, which is a huge concern, as well as other types of public safety issues, making it kind of a vulnerable system to begin with. So I think that a lot of people want it to be closed, and that there would, the federal government will provide oversight. The long-term waste maintenance is, a big concern. The job placement of the people working there is a big concern. But I think we're all reminded of Chernobyl in Japan and what happened over there, and we want to. I think everyone here probably wants to watch over it and make sure everything goes well. Thank you.
Mark Allegro.
Yeah, Pilgrim is closing, and all that remains now is for the proper oversight agencies to track and monitor the process, and there should be no problems. Of course, anybody who doesn't do that should be held accountable. The issue of disposal of the waste itself, actually, that was passed in Congress in a bipartisan fashion a number of years ago and signed into law by the president that these spent fuel rods from anywhere in the country would be delivered to Yucca in Nevada. So it wasn't bipartisan. I mean, it wasn't partisan politics in the sense that Congress didn't pass it and the president didn't sign it. Rather, the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has blocked the mountain from going into activity. On the economic side, mercifully, the town of Plymouth has been able to reduce their revenue stream from that source from about 40% originally to about 5%. There will be some lost jobs, and the prices of energy will increase. But otherwise, it should be on target, just requires the proper oversight.
Thank you. Chris Cataldo.
Well, I doubt that it's going to be on target because I actually am very much not so optimistic in our leadership. And, I think it's a collaboration of state, local, and federal authorities. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission needs to work a lot more diligently than they have in the past with all these hiccups. This is about transitioning jobs as well. This is about catching up with energy. Nuclear power, yes, it's clean, but it is dangerous. We do have the $1 billion that's been allocated to the shutting down of this plant. But I really, truly believe that this is a question of transitioning Massachusetts and its energy sources from just nuclear. I mean, you look at 40% of what powers Massachusetts, and it's fossil fuel based, mostly the gas. And what we need to do here is take a look at the opportunity that we have to develop, especially being such a marine sanctuary, a marine hub, and again an area where we can have the opportunity because of our resources to benefit from solar, from hydro, and again from wind as well. And I really do believe that our Democrats and our Republicans, they're too busy being entrenched by the special interests that are keeping the dominance on fossil fuels. And thank you very much.
Thank you. You wanted a rebuttal?
Yeah, I just think that we do ourselves a disservice by going into panic mode. There's never even been a sickened cow in this country from nuclear energy. It's inexpensive, relatively clean and safe. It's not Chernobyl, and it's not Fukushima.
All right, thank you. We are. Oh, go ahead.
Well, the case in Pilgrim is not just a case of an aging facility. It's also a case of mismanagement that's occurred. They've defied regulations time and time again, and we worked hard. I just led a congressional delegation forward on making sure they don't try and escape their responsibility for a hardened containment fence, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. We are talking with the candidates running for Congress in the 9th District, and we'll talk more after a quick break. You're listening to The Point, and we are wrapping up our series of debates this morning with the candidates running for U.S. Congress in the 9th Congressional District. The candidates are Mark Allegro, Christopher Cataldo, William Keating, Paul Harrington, and Anna Grace Raddick. 866-999-4626 is our number if you'd like to pose a question to the candidates. Our email address is thepoint@capeandislands.org. Paul Harrington, your turn to go first. In Chatham, town officials are fighting efforts by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to take control of 717 acres of the Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge. The federal government wants to control fishing and other activities in the waters there. What is your view on this, and what's the best way to resolve this issue?
Well, first of all, I boat in that area all the time. It's a beautiful area. I think we need to have less infighting between the federal government and local governments and state governments on these kinds of issues and more cooperation. Congressman Keating has filed a bill. It probably has no chance of being passed. It's about 45 words that says that the federal government doesn't have rights to that particular section of Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge. I think we need to find a way to resolve these problems by sitting down and letting that process take place. There's not a big problem there now. It's been well managed. The federal government has indicated that it's been well managed. It's not really a power grab. So I think we need to work better. One of the problems we have is not just the divisiveness between the parties, but there's also this split between the different levels of government in the country. And I think we can get them to work together and come to a resolution without getting into a fight about every little issue.
Thank you. Anna Grace?
Well, I've thought a little bit about the fishermen. I want to work with the fishermen. I really want to sit down and listen to their concerns. They're very hard workers, and they're pillars in our community. And I feel that sometimes I feel as if they're not listened to enough, and their concerns are not considered. And the facts and the scientific facts that are presented are kind of taken at face value, and the human component is completely removed. So I really would like to be a person who really listens to their concerns and finds a midway point. And well, thank you.
Thank you. Mark Allegro.
Well, the way to avoid some of the contentiousness that Paul refers to is to pull the reins in on the federal government, who more and more, particularly under this administration, has been in the habit of making land grabs using Antiquities Acts to unprecedented levels. It's not just Monomoy Island, but it's George's Bank and other fishing areas. These areas belong administered by the states, not the federal government. It's a broad problem. It affects almost every aspect of our life, from our health care to where we drop a fishing line in the water. We need to scale back, streamline the federal government, and get them out of our daily life and out of issues like this.
Thank you. Chris Cataldo.
I have the highest respect for our fishermen. I mean, this industry's been around for 400 years, and I'll tell you, they've been fighting onerous regulations really for quite some time. And what's happening right now is, this marine sanctuary that's been decreed by executive order completely circumvented our representation, completely circumvented, any input from the state. The legislature's put in place to protect us from these types of actions. And, when you look at this particular area that's been encompassed, in the sanctuary, it's going to stay just as beautiful as it was, with or without the federal government. And you know what? We need it without the federal government, because the way that this looks here is that, our lobstermen are basically on a 7-year notice, and it's even less for some of the other components, and it all comes down to, our fishermen are already having to follow rules that no one else in the world is following. And then on top of it, we've got our feds now dictating where they can and cannot compete against these rules that are stacked against them. It's a travesty. Fishing, 10% of the fish we get in the store is coming from here. The rest is overseas. We need to get that back. Thank you, Mindy.
William Keating.
Well, as much as people here trying to make everything a partisan issue, this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue about who has control of that. The map indicates one thing. The statutory language indicates another. I put in legislation to deal with this, and the AG is going to take action dealing with it. But it's not a partisan issue. The governor believes it should be land. The Republican governor believes that the land should be under Commonwealth control. The Democratic Attorney General believes it should be under Commonwealth control. The Commonwealths have been good stewards, and this is about the future and subsurface, land that's there that may or may not surface someday. But it's important to get the action corrected, and I believe it should be under Commonwealth control, and hopefully either through legislation, which is difficult in this Congress, or through litigation, which is more hopeful, we'll get this resolved.
Thank you. You wanted 30 seconds, Mark Allegro?
Yeah, well, I didn't hear anybody in here say that this was a Republican or Democrat partisan issue. This is an issue of the federal government overstepping its bounds and imposing on the states. And as Mr. Keating said, all of these agencies and individuals in the states are in agreement. It belongs to the states' oversight. It's the federal government that needs to get out of the way.
Thank you. Anna Grace Raddick, we're going to start with you this time. What would your plan be to mitigate impacts of climate change and specifically sea level rise?
Well, I support wind power, solar power. I think that we all have to do our part in reducing carbon emissions. Carpooling, this new thing called Uber, seems to be a pretty good thing. People riding together and limiting electricity use. I think that in the 80s there was a big movement towards these things. We had lights out day, but we don't have that anymore. And I feel that we as a community have to get together and engage and be really proactive, and work towards that, as well as, just opting for solar, opting for new ways to create energy. Thank you.
Mark Allegro.
Yeah, Mindy, with that question, you jumped the scientific gun. I'm going to make this as quick as I can. I have 2 articles here in Science and in Nature, the world's leading peer-reviewed scientific journals, on global warming and climate change on where? On Mars. Here's another article from MIT on Pluto undergoing climate change. Jupiter is warming as well. So you see, it's last I heard, manufacturing of SUVs on Pluto, Jupiter, Mars has not been doing well. So it's not the SUVs, it's the SUN. Okay. Now, as far as the argument that 98% of scientists believe it, that's bunk too. I have an article over here in a peer-reviewed journal saying that only 36% of geologists and climatologists agree with man-made global warming. Here's an article over here that's got a list of scores of thousands of other climate scientists and otherwise who believe that it's questionable as well. Here's a list of global warming activists who are now skeptics. You got to let the science decide it. Scientific fact isn't determined by consensus. It's determined by natural fact.
Thank you. Chris Cataldo.
Well, I think that when we look at climate change, it's just undeniable. This is what's happening. And I really, truly believe that it shouldn't be about subsidies or tax breaks. It shouldn't be, when you look at what's going on here, we have all the innovation, all the technology, all the people and the skills to develop this alternative energy so that we don't have to rely on fossil fuels, which generate carbon emissions. We need to look at what happened in Paris, right? They pledged to have 2% pre-industrial levels reduced. And, it was a UN-type arrangement. And what I'm trying to say here is that when you look at what works and what doesn't, sovereign governments need to pass laws within their own respective legislatures, and those laws need to coincide with the objective here. We need to work together as a world, but it's all about figuring out, which countries are where they need to be, and in respect to what they can do, doing what they can. I'm not as optimistic that this agreement will work. The same way I'm not optimistic that the AG is going to save our fishermen. The same way that she's trying to save people, from the gun rights. What I think here is that our Democrats, our Republicans, they've got interests that are being funded by energy.
Thank you.
And it's not the good kind. Thank you.
William Keating.
I don't think you have to go to Pluto or Mars to find out if there's climate change effects here. Just look around Cape Cod and the islands. I've been working on so many fronts with this, working on making sure across the aisle we have coastal resiliency funds for emergencies, working with the Republican representative from New Jersey for $46 million to help communities deal with these emergencies. I've been working and leading on coastal resiliency issues, including estuaries and ways nature can heal itself. I've been working on the flood insurance issue, the effects on the fishing industry, the effects on the aquaculture industry, the shellfish industry. Right down here in Woods Hole, we had a summit not long ago dealing with the effects of ocean acidification and how that affects business. This is an environmental issue, but for Cape Cod and the islands, it is an economic issue as well. And it has to be addressed, and I'm doing that, and I'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Paul Harrington.
This issue, I believe, has become too politicized. The partisans on the right and the left believe in their extreme positions almost with a religious fervor, without necessarily any scientific evidence. I still believe there are unanswered questions. There's certainly enough evidence that climate change is related to man-made activities. But we need to take a closer look. We need to do more study, and not just international, the IPCC, the UN study, but the United States should have more study and more facts on this issue. As I said before, we need to balance the 3 E's: the environment, the economy, and energy. And everyone wants a clean environment and affordable energy and a strong economy. But that's a balance. You can't go in one extreme. So I think this is another issue where there's too much partisan divisiveness, and we need to take a deep breath and look at this issue more carefully.
Thank you. Mark Allegro, you wanted a 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah. I just held up articles talking about global warming on other planets that have no factories that SUVs are banned. And I just showed a bunch of data and then we went around the table and everybody talked about what they believed in and what they work on. Well, if you're working on things, and I would ask any of you to take 30 seconds here to rebut and tell me just what the evidence is that you're talking about. Okay. Paul, Mr. Keating, that supports global.
Okay.
I'd be happy to as well.
Go ahead, Chris, 30 seconds.
It's funny. This ties into campaign finance reform. It ties into the dark money. When you look at the economy that we have, you look at the kind of money that's being made, it's disproportionately being made on energy that is outdated, and that's what's bankrolling the Democrats and Republicans, and that's why we haven't seen any development take place to the extent that it needs to help this problem that we have.
All right. Bill Keating.
There's been studies, 3 of them, with 99% of climate scientists, peer-reviewed agreeing. Now, I know Mark is attached, and he's a part of the Heartland Institute that has some of those studies and is a leading force. But they're funded by the Koch brothers and by ExxonMobil. I'm talking about across the country and across the world. There's 74 countries that agree with this because of the Paris Agreement. There's 190 dealing with air fuel and that problem. There's 174 dealing with the effects of cooling toxins. So this is all these countries believe in it. The scientists agree with it, and we have to just look around to believe it.
Paul Harrington.
Yes, I've read 3 books on this, filled with scientific data and information
What
and
is it?
statistics, and I'll get you the names of the 3 books. And there, I mean, one book leaned one way, one book leaned the other way, and the other one was pretty neutral, but they were filled with facts. I'm not a scientist. I don't understand the science. I don't pretend to, but I certainly believe there's plenty of unanswered questions here, and this is not a cut and dried partisan issue.
Thank you. 30 seconds, Anna Grace Radek.
I just wanted to say that I'm on the fence because astronomy and geology were a hobby of mine as a child, and so I see your point of view, Mr. Allegro. But, the thing that bothers me is, the polar bears are headed south, and so I just feel like something must be done. What do you think about that? But I can see what you're saying. I know because I studied astronomy. And go ahead.
Polar bears aren't heading south, and the population of polar bears has been increasing for the past 2.5 decades.
Okay, we're going to have to
Thank
leave
you.
it there. We agree to disagree here. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue more with the candidates running for U.S. Congress in the 9th. You're listening to The Point. We are talking with the candidates running for U.S. Congress in the 9th Congressional District, Mark Allegro, Christopher Cataldo, William Keating, Paul Harrington, and Anna Grace Radek. Mark Allegro, your turn to go first. Massachusetts has the 5th highest electricity rate in the nation. Natural gas is one solution people have pointed to keep rates down, but there's been an outcry across the state, including here on the Cape, with people concerned about building new infrastructure to rely on another fossil fuel. Do you support more natural gas?
Yes, I do. And one of the reasons that our rates are so high, and listen, this goes back to an earlier question, we have this panicked notion about nuclear energy, which is cheap, safe, and the closest thing to renewable that you can get. And for instance, in France, a huge percentage of France's power comes from nuclear energy. They've had no accidents. In this country, even here at Pilgrim, people are concerned about shutdowns, but they're programmed shutdowns. It's monitored so that if a problem occurs, sectors or an entire plant will shut down. So energy costs, yes, natural gas, clean coal. And in this district, we shut down coal-producing plants. So and a mix of nuclear and the renewables, air and solar are outstanding options that need to be developed. But they need to make their own way through development, both commercially and scientifically, and not be propped up falsely by federal funds.
Thank you. Chris Cataldo.
I think we need to enforce some of these antitrust measures that break up some of these large entities that control and dominate the energy industry to make sure that we have to rely on fossil fuel, not because we need to. And, I understand that there's going to need to be a transition here with jobs. There's going to need to be a transition here with manufacturing. And what we need to understand is that the future is solar, it's wind, it's hydro. And again, if we're going to make this the Silicon Valley of the country, we need to absolutely leverage the fact that if we're going to spend the money, the taxpayers' money, on infrastructure developments, it should definitely be something that is going to serve us in the future. And let's face it, fossil fuel it's dangerous. I mean, look at the Colonial Pipeline. We're about to see our gas prices go up probably a little more than 20 cents because the pipeline had an explosion. We're so over-reliant on this fossil fuel, and it's so outdated, and it's so ridiculous that this is happening that it's actually going to cost us more. And, this is why we need a leader that's not tainted by either party.
Thank you. William Keating.
Let me give a little different slice of this, if I could, local slice. But I was just in Joint Base Cape Cod, and we were dealing with the issues of energy resiliency because it's a security issue as well. With cyber attacks, they could close down our grids. I mention this because Joint Base Cape Cod is a terrific example of almost becoming self-sufficient with energy. They have geothermal there, energy. They're putting more solar energy there. They have wind power that's cleaning the contamination from the plumes from the base that occurred down in this part of the Cape. And they've revised their technology to make it more efficient. So these things can be done. And it's not just important for residential energy. It's important for our security, but it's also important for the Cape because these are the new industries. We're really in the cusp of wind power, the biggest offshore wind maybe in the country, and the research that's being done right next door here in Woods Hole that are going to make us more energy efficient.
Thank you. Paul Harrington.
I'm all for wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, and clean energy, but those are not going to solve our energy problems in the near future. We need to continue to work on those, but we need natural gas. There's no question about that. And our electricity rates are high in Massachusetts because we don't have cheap ways to get natural gas in. Every time a pipeline is proposed, no matter where it is, it's killed. So, yes, I would support pipelines where needed, done the proper way with the proper regulation. They're safer than trains and trucks to transport natural gas. We have a steady stream of monstrous LNG tankers going in and out of Boston Harbor. I used to look at them when I lived in Boston for a while. And believe me, those aren't the safest things in the world. And we're importing that natural gas from the Mideast. So, again, I think we need to take a balanced approach to our energy needs. Balance it, energy, environment, and the economy.
Thank you. Anna Grace Raddick.
Well, I think that there should be tax incentives for people who shut their lights off at 7 p.m., as well as there should be tax incentives for people who drive less, like a certain amount of miles per year. And there might be a way to record that, and people could get a tax break, as well as I do support pipelines where they're needed. It seems that we need to become more self-sufficient. But I also, I grew up with a wood stove, and I think that people should look into getting a wood stove. They're quite toasty and comfortable, and people could save a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to quickly say that Massachusetts and Vermont operate without any of this fossil fuel, and that it can be done. It's a lot closer to home than we think. And, I really wanted to say that this is an intellectual property thing. You can have all the research done in the world, which we need to develop the technology. But once you have that research, if there's so much anti-competition, that you can't actually use it to make anything, we've got a problem. We made the telephone, electricity, the car, and we need to make sure that there is a gateway that's open for this kind of technology to actually manifest.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask a question. Hopefully you'll go under a minute so we can get to closing comments. Chris, we're going to start with you. Okay. Many Americans are troubled by the lack of collaboration and civility in Congress. So how do you propose to break the gridlock, and would you be willing to work with the president no matter which party is elected?
Absolutely. I'm going to be working with anybody that's going to serve the people of the 9th District of Massachusetts. And I'll tell you, I'll prove my authenticity by just simply asking you to review my FEC reports and my House Ethics reports. You'll see that I'm not a millionaire. I'm a member of the middle class that punched a time clock for 40 hours a week. And, I'll tell you, I'm not going to take a penny more than the median income as a salary. And I hope that everyone at this table will do the same if elected. I also stand for term limits. You're not going to see me in office for any more than 2 terms, period, the end.
All right, thank you. William Keating.
Yeah, I'm already doing it. Part of it's relationship. If you're a legislator, I've had Republican members from Texas over to my house here in the Cape. We work out in the gym together. We go visit our troops together. We bond together. That's the important thing. Relationships number one. But then I've translated that into action. I've worked on matters of national security, bipartisan efforts, the research and the investigation of the Boston bombing. I was the only Democrat alone standing up to make it public after a year's worth of research. And on issues of opioid abuse, flood insurance, I've worked across the aisle on all of these issues together. So I can point to actual work, doing the kind of bipartisan work that we have to have more of in Congress.
Thank you. Paul Harrington.
I think this may be the worst choice for president we've ever had in the history of the country. To me, it's embarrassing. And I think it's because of the two-party system, the way they operate. Whoever is elected president the next time, it's going to be a huge challenge for Congress to try to do its job and to manage and solve some of the problems that we have. There's not a lot of bipartisanship in Congress. We need to create more independent thinking there. We need more independence, and that's what I would do if I were elected.
Thank you. Anna Grace Raddick.
Is the question whether I could work with the president?
Yes.
Yes, I think I could. I met Hillary Clinton recently in New Hampshire, and I really have a lot of respect for her. I talked to a Chinese journalist who told me that she and her husband actually changed the world's view of America, something we don't really hear on CNN and Fox News. She's done a lot of work around the world. I looked through her book, and I have the greatest respect for her. Donald Trump, actually, he reminds me of my family. My grandfather worked on Wall Street, and I think I'd get along with him really well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Allegro.
Simple and quick answer is yes, but I'm very grateful to Mr. Keating for providing me this opportunity to set the record straight, because at every question today and previously, he always talks about reaching across the aisle and bipartisanship, and he talks about all this legislation that he's been working on. Let me set the record straight here. almost 95% of the time, Mr. Keating votes with his own party. That's not exactly a record of bipartisanship. And in addition, there's no record of any major legislation of Mr. Keating's ever become a law. The only one he's passed that I'm aware of is changing the name of a post office in Sagamore.
Thank you.
I have to rebut that.
Go ahead, quick.
Quickly, I want to say this, that you'd have to know Congress. There is legislation. You deal with amendments. That the legislation I'm talking through are getting through bills. How do they get in the bills? By working across the aisle with the majority party. Now, sure, there's percentages, but 64 times they put things on bills just trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. So you have poison pills in these bills, but we're going to work together, and I've a proven record of doing it.
We're going to have to move to closing comments so everybody has time. William Keating, we start with you.
Well, thank you. I think this particular election is not as much about Democrat or Republican. I have a lot of Republican and independent support in this district. I think it's about extreme versus mainstream. And by mainstream, I mean knowing the district and knowing the needs, the unique needs of this district. I've worked together on the industries that are here. I've worked to bipartisan way to work to get the H-2B program, to make sure the workers are here for the hospitality industry and the restaurant industry, making sure there were people there to keep these open, saving tens of millions of dollars right here in Cape Cod. I've worked in the cranberry industry to help them, the fishing industry. I've worked for helping the housing issue that we are plagued with here in Cape Cod, as well as trying to develop the green economy for the new jobs and new jobs for young people. I've worked to make sure that the community health centers, whether it's the Outer Cape, Duffy, Island Health, Community Health of Cape Cod, that those monies are there to provide health access for people as well. And I've made sure that the unique needs we have in dredging and the monies are there for research to move our country forward, but also move this district forward. I work with mainstream people of this district and their needs, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue that. And please, people, give me the opportunity to do it again on November 8th.
Thank you. Paul Harrington.
Thank you, Mindy, and thank you to the station for this opportunity. I decided to run for Congress because the political system is dysfunctional. The two parties have created divisions in the country that are getting worse. Americans no longer have civil discussions about politics and government. The Democrats and Republicans care more about winning their little turf battles than getting anything important done. They spend too much time fundraising and meeting with lobbyists. The two-party system is broken and needs to be fixed if the country is going to solve its growing problems. I'd like to read a quote from John Adams. "There is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. The country does face serious challenges in the years ahead and will need a fully functioning Congress to deal with them. The economy is barely growing, the true unemployment rate is over 10%, and productivity growth is the slowest in decades. Public debt is the highest percentage of the economy than any time since just after World War II. Unfunded public pensions are a ticking time bomb, and Social Security and Medicare are unsustainable because there's no real money in those trusts. It's unless you count IOUs from the government to itself. Public education is mired in bureaucracy, politics, and special interest, and too many children are not receiving a quality education. Healthcare remains too expensive, uncompetitive. We need competition, choice, and transparency. Maybe we can solve these problems if we have a little more independent thinking in Congress, and that's why I'm running."
Thank you. Anna Grace Raddick.
I'm Anna Grace Raddick. I'd like to ask your vote November 8th, 2016. 51% of the United States population are women, but only 18.5% of women are in Congress. We need more women to represent families and women's rights and all people's rights. I'm in particular interested in worker rights. I plan to fight white-collar crime with a new ID program. I still need a new ID. My ID program available through local police, working with the U.S. Marshals that the U.S. Marshals approved of, would save lives. I also created some ways to prevent human trafficking within the Federal Immigration Office to prevent green card fraud against foreigners and Americans, which would preserve the dignity of life. And I also would like to work on the immigration problem. There's too many undocumented workers in this country. It does pose a problem, and they are outside of the scope of law enforcement. For instance, if an immigrant does commit a crime, often they're not prosecuted because of they have diplomatic immunity. And so I stood out in the Hot Sun. I got 2,443 signatures from local residents. And I do appreciate your support, and I hope you'll consider voting for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Allegro.
I hate to use a worn-out term, but there he goes again. We talk about fact, and the fact is that he's voted 95% of the time with his party. That's partisan, and the response to that was, again, more stories about all the legislation he's worked on. But look, let's really set aside party politics for just a few minutes, and let's answer these questions. Do any of us really believe it's okay to spend $1 trillion more than we have each year? Is there anyone listening who honestly believes that the economy is hunky-dory? In the midst of this opiate crisis, if I tell you that more than half the heroin coming into the country comes across our southern border, is there anyone who would argue that we shouldn't secure the southern border against illegal trafficking? These are things on which we can all agree. Then why do we do things that aren't in our national interest? Partisan politics. Could it be because we have politicians so entrenched in Washington, so intensely bent on their agenda, that they've lost their ties with the rest of us? On November 8th, we'll be presented with two different visions of America. One that puts its faith in bloated, intrusive, and corrupt federal government. Another that relies on the common sense, industry, and entrepreneurial spirit that made America great in the first place. You out there of my age and older, remember that America. So please ask yourselves about that question between now and Election Day. And please be assured of this. If you vote for Mark Allegro on November 8th, you'll be sending your voice, our voice, to Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Chris Cataldo.
Well, if elected, when elected, I'll be the only person of the Massachusetts delegation that supports the recreationalization of marijuana and the removal of it from the Schedule I substance federal penal code. 4 people a day die from heroin and opioids. Marijuana, by the way, has nothing to do with that. I truly believe that. 80% of them started on prescriptions from doctors themselves, and 20% get the help they need, while Purdue Pharma makes $3 billion a year. And Massachusetts is ranked the 5th most profitable in doctor kickbacks to the tune of $170 million. Democrats and Republicans dial for dollars 6 to 8 hours a day, a record $730 million so far in 2016, while 22 veterans a day commit suicide and can't go to private health care facilities initially. Freedom of intellectual property, invention, real competition has been sold out by the Democrats and Republicans. NAFTA and the 66,000 manufacturing plants and 5.7 million jobs lost are the proof. $41,000 a second in Federal Reserve quantitative easing is selling out our children's financial futures. We, the people, can't afford it anymore. There is already enough money coming in, $4.3 trillion to be exact, every fiscal year. We can lower taxes. We can do it with leadership that isn't bought. $25 billion alone goes to vacant federal buildings, while our teachers pay for pencils. Vote Chris Cataldo for Congress because the FEC and health ethics prove my authenticity. The polls are wrong. The parties underestimate the everyday American. CataldoForCongress.com is proof. Vote third one down on the ballot. God bless you all. God save the Commonwealth. And God bless this country.
Thanks to all the candidates, Mark Allegro, Christopher Cataldo, William Keating, Paul Harrington, and Anna Grace Raddick. Thank you all for being here today. Election Day just 5 days away. Join us for complete coverage of local and national races and results for statewide ballot questions beginning at 8 p.m. We'll have reporters at Election Night headquarters around the region, and joining me in studio will be Senator Dan Wolf, former Senator Henri Rauschenbach, and Paul Neswicki. You can check out all of our debates on our elections page at capeandislands.org. I'm Mindy Todd. Thanks for listening.
The Point is produced by Amy Vince. The executive producer is Mindy Todd. Production assistance from Jenny Junker. Theme music by Benjamin Verdery and William Coulter.